Good morning, Rowan. It's the 9th of January 2016 and it's just before 5 AM, and I didn't make this video last night because I had a very long siesta yesterday that lasted kind of all day really. So I'm up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed this morning and I'm making you this video just in case you might be worrying that I'm going to be seducing any priests over the weekend. So don't worry, I'm not planning to. But before I spend the weekend not seducing priests, I'm going to make a few comments at long last about your amazing article in the New Statesman. Well, it's supposed to be a book review really of a book called The Book of Magic, From Antiquity to the Enlightenment by Brian Copenhaver. I don't know how you pronounce that. But as usual, you're just having the odd snipe and rambling in a random fashion and quoting things inaccurately. So I'm just going to not really take a great deal of notice about what you're saying that you're doing in this article, and I'm going to comment on it from my own perspective, let's say. So, for some mysterious reason, even though this is about a book about magic by Brian Copenhaver, however you pronounce it, you start off by quoting someone entirely different called James Fraser. And you say, "In practice, magic and religion, as Fraser defines them, are inseparably intertwined to the degree that both assume the existence of invisible agencies that may perhaps be persuaded or coaxed in a particular way." Well, I can't really comment on religion because, you know, there's quite a lot of different religions who sometimes approach things in quite a different way and certainly have different beliefs. But I can talk about Christianity, so I'm going to talk, rather than talk about magic and religion, which is what you've said. And you do talk about religion rather than Christianity quite a lot, which is quite strange for someone who's such a high-profile alleged Christian. But you want to convey the impression that all religions are really the same, don't you? So that's why you do that. So I'm not going to comment on magic and religion, I'm going to comment on magic and Christianity, since I'm a Christian and you're supposed to be a Christian. So, as I understand it, magic, if you're performing magic, I don't mean stage conjuring tricks, I mean if you're performing what's supposed to be real magic, then you're trying to manipulate the environment by means of supernatural forces that you invoke in order to achieve the outcome that you want. So you're kind of imposing your will on the environment with magic, and the magic is an extension or going out of your will, your own will or desires into the environment. And so that's magic as I understand it. And Christianity, of course we can pray to God and ask him for things, but the real fundamental purpose of the Christian life is that the person modifies their will so that it's in accordance with the divine will, with God's will. And we can see this easily in the Lord's Prayer, where we pray, "Thy will be done," meaning the will of God. So we don't say, "Look, God, do my will," when we pray. We say, "Your will be done." So rather than magic and religion being inseparably intertwined, magic and Christianity are actually opposites of each other. So I'm sure people like you, if you do even pray at all, will just turn up with a shopping list and tell God what he ought to do in an imperious tone, as if you were ordering one of your servants about. But that's not really the way to pray. You're supposed to be conforming your will to God's will, not trying to dictate to God what he ought to do. So those are the differences between magic and Christianity, which I thought I ought to inform you about. Because this is a factor that you seem quite oblivious to. So anyway, you go on and you make a reference to prurient and paranoid fantasies of clerical witch hunters. Well, I thought I'd look up prurient because it's not a word I use very often, and I might start using it more often now because I really quite like it. So I thought I knew what it meant, so I thought, well, I'll look it up anyway, and I liked the definition so much, I'm going to read it out. So here we are, prurient, having or encouraging an excessive interest in sexual matters, especially in the sexual activity of others. So that describes you perfectly, doesn't it? You're prurient. Anyway, there was a list of synonyms as well. So I thought I'd read some of those out as well because they just sounded great and I couldn't think of a better way to describe you. So now I can describe you as prurient, salacious, licentious, voyeuristic, lascivious, lecherous and lustful. Wow, what a fantastic list of words that is. I'm going to read it again. Salacious, licentious, voyeuristic, lascivious, lecherous and lustful. So you're trying to call me prurient, aren't you? And say that I'm paranoid about clerical witch hunters. Well, you're clerical, aren't you? And you are a witch hunter because you conducted a witch hunt against me, didn't you? Hounding me around the country and lying your face off behind my back just because you tried to get your leg over twice and I refused you. So that's why you did that, and you wanted to bring me under your control, and you wanted to shut me up, and you wanted to discredit me in case I blew the whistle on you. So you're describing me as prurient when I actually have no interest at all in your sex life, other than the fact that you tried to involve me in your sex life. And in particular when you were already married to somebody else, God help her. So that's my interest in your sex life, that I didn't have any interest in your sex life, but you still tried to get your leg over and wouldn't really take no for an answer, would you? Because you then tried it on again later in the year, in September 1994, when I went to the governing body of the church in Wales to run a bookstall for a Christian bookshop that I was working for at the time. So you tried to get your leg over there a couple of times as well. So I certainly do not have any prurient fantasies about you or about your astrophysical clergy friend David Pete, who masturbated in front of me. This isn't a fantasy, it is a fact. And you have been spreading your sexual fantasies about me behind my back for decades. So you are the one with the prurient fantasies. Salacious, licentious, voyeuristic, lascivious, lecherous and lustful. I particularly like the word voyeuristic because, as I've said before, even if I was a delinquent sex maniac and fantasist and repressed lesbian and pre-seducer, blah 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 and whatever other crap you came out with, even if all of those things were true, it's still got nothing at all to do with you. So one thing I really can't understand is why no one wondered why a creepy old fart like you was so obsessed with a young woman's sex life. Because you're salacious, licentious, voyeuristic, lascivious, lecherous, lustful and prurient. And a pervert. Anyway, so I'll leave that there and I'll move on. So now you're having a snipe about my Merry Christmas Rowan video because she's trying to squirm out of the fact that you weren't in Manhattan on 9/11 and you're actually a perception manager for the New World Order. So you tell this heartrending story of how you thought the Twin Towers were going to land on top of you and that was the end of you, and you had to wear a gas mask and run off and heroically rescue some tiny children and all that kind of thing. And so we're supposed to be drawn into the details of this story and empathise with you and feel horrified and sad and upset and relieved and all these kind of things. You're playing on our emotions so that we don't spend any time figuring out that the whole story itself is a heap of garbage. So you're a perception manager, and this is what you have to say anyway in this article, which is allegedly a book review. So you say, any sort of action at a distance, above all the phenomena of magnetism, required an explanatory scheme rather more capacious than a billiard ball materialism, causality as a world of things bumping into each other, which is why, a nice irony, Newtonian gravity was written off by serious scientific contemporaries as yet another form of magical speculation. So this reference to billiard balls is a reference to the clip from Dr. Judy Wood that I played in your Christmas greeting video, where she explained using a billiard ball as a symbol, really, how long it should have taken the Twin Towers to collapse and how long the seismic register should have been. And the fact is that it simply can't have happened in the way that the 9/11 Commission report said that it did. By floors pancaking one down onto another and eventually all crashing to the ground. It can't have happened like that because it would have taken much longer, and there would have been a far greater seismic register had it happened that way. And that way of the building collapsing was completely impossible anyway, but even if it could have collapsed that way, it would have taken far longer. And another thing that she didn't mention on that video, but which is another factor which proves that this model of the collapse is completely impossible, is that the foundations of the Twin Towers went down a phenomenally long way, and they were built right at the side of the Hudson River, and because of that they had to be placed in something that they called the bathtub to stop the Hudson River flooding into the foundations. And had the buildings collapsed in the way that was described in the 9/11 Commission report, the weight of all that material crashing to the ground would have smashed this bathtub, and it would have caused the Hudson River to flood the New York subway system. And since that didn't happen, the buildings cannot possibly have collapsed in the way that we were told they did. So I only put some little video clips in that Merry Christmas Rowan video, but I've done a phenomenal amount of research, particularly around the stories that you and people associated with you have told, and I know that you're lying, and I only put a smidgen of it in that video. So don't really bother telling me that Newtonian gravity was written off by serious scientific contemporaries, because quite frankly I don't care, because I'm not daft. And you know, the first thing I thought, I actually saw on that day the planes going into those buildings allegedly not long after it happened, and my first thought about that, because I've got an A-level in chemistry, is that aluminium wouldn't penetrate steel buildings, steel and concrete buildings, because I know the properties of aluminium and I know the properties of steel and concrete, and I know that aluminium would just smash up hitting into a building that way. But because I wasn't really I was just stunned at the time, I rationalised it to myself that maybe they could do it because they were travelling so fast. And of course I've since found out that aircraft can't even fly that fast at that low altitude without having engines 6 times bigger. So there are so many holes in that story, Rowan. It's a complete load of rubbish. It's complete and utter rubbish. And you are a perception manager. That's your job, to involve us in the story of your escape and how heroic you were rescuing all those children and nearly having the buildings collapse upon you, how terrifying, blah blah blah, that we don't even dare to ask, well, is it even true? So that's you, Rowan Williams, perception manager for the New World Order. Anyway, you go on to say, modern physics is still, after all, preoccupied with action or causality at a distance. Well, I don't know how you know what modern physics is preoccupied with, unless you're an expert on that, as well as all the other things you proclaim yourself an expert on. So I don't know if this story is even true or not, but your perverted clergy friend who masturbated in front of me, David Pete, he did claim to be an astrophysicist, and he was actually on a list of honorary research fellows in the physics department at Leeds University. But on the occasion when I went to his house to speak to him of a pastoral matter, he had a poster of a supernova on his wall, which was from the New Scientist. Well, I found this quite surprising to start with, because the New Scientist isn't an academic publication. It's a public interest magazine, a general interest for people who've got, you know, just ordinary members of the public who've got an interest in scientific matters. So it's not an academic journal. So I was surprised he'd even be buying the New Scientist anyway, because it's just not aimed at people who were academics. So that surprised me, that he'd have this poster from the New Scientist on his wall. So I said to him, oh, I like your supernova. So he said, oh yes, my research is about supernovas. So he said to me, do you know anything about supernovas? So I said, well, actually I do know a bit about supernovas, because I was very interested in astronomy as a child. And then he said, oh, my research isn't about supernovas, it's about transition elements. So I said, oh yeah, transition elements. I said, I've got an A-level in chemistry. I said, I was really interested in transition elements. And I started to talk about the different energy levels of electrons in transition elements, and how when light falls on them, this gives the electrons more energy and they move up to a higher energy level, and then when they fall down again to the lower energy level, they emit coloured light. And he looked quite panic-stricken at this and said, oh, my research isn't really about transition elements. So I'm rather suspicious of his academic credentials as an astrophysicist, as well as because he claimed to be a genius theologian as well. He didn't even have a degree in theology, and he talked nothing but utter rubbish, just like you. So that's what I've got to say about that comment about physics. Anyway, so you go on to say, magic appeals to the authority of demonstrable results rather than established hierarchies. So you think I'm an anti-authoritarian, and you think if you say magic is something against established hierarchies, then you're going to interest me in it. Right. About modern economic systems. you're not saying this. This is what you say about modern economic systems. And then you say this: if we are baffled by the intellectual respectability of magic in earlier days, it may be illuminating to think about our own willingness to be fascinated, in the old English sense of bewitched, by ambitious and risk-laden systems based on deeply hidden processes. Well, I don't think generating money out of nothing is a deeply hidden process, really. The money's generated out of nothing and then lent to the government, and then we have to pay it back at interest. That's not a hidden process, that's out in the open. So, you go on to say, certain kinds of Christianity developed a particular neurosis about certain forms of magic, witchcraft as a matter of covenants with Satan. So you're saying I've got a neurosis now? Well, you can say what you want, because you just talk crap anyway. And you have made a covenant with Satan. You don't believe in Satan. But let me tell you this, even if I was an atheist, I'd still think you were satanic, because Satan is defined, is defined by Jesus as a liar and the father of lies. And all you do is lie. So even if I was an atheist, this is how Satan is defined, as a liar and the father of lies. And you're a liar. So you never do anything but lie. So you would be satanic to me, even if I was an atheist. So don't bother calling me neurotic, because I'm not neurotic. You're a psychopath and you're gaslighting again, so don't even bother, you pathetic little man. Anyway, you go on to say, you say this is another irony, that the judicial system most consistently sceptical about witchcraft in 16th century Europe was the Inquisition. Well, this is actually true, believe it or not. It's quite astonishing that you might say something that's true, but you're only saying it to be manipulative, which I'll come on to in a minute. But it was really Protestants who were very enthusiastic about burning witches, and the Inquisition didn't really have a lot to do with seeking witches, and even when witches were brought to them, alleged witches, they usually say, oh well, there's no evidence, don't be silly. So that's actually true, but the reason that you're saying that is because you want to shut me up, talking about you being involved with the Illuminati, who practice black magic and are Luciferians, and you're a Luciferian, and you've sold your soul to Satan to get where you are. And whether you've done that literally or metaphorically, and I think you've done it literally, because you don't believe in these things anyway, so it doesn't matter to you. You'd just do it if it would get you what you wanted. But even if you haven't done it literally, you've done it metaphorically to get what you wanted out of life. So don't bother telling me that the Inquisition was sceptical about witchcraft in the 16th century as a means of shutting me up about your malevolent activities in the 21st century, because I don't care. Anyway, you go on to say just after that appalling 15th century manual for witchfinders, Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches, was mostly written by an inquisitor who had been disciplined for the wildness of his methods and conclusion. Well, of course, I did put some Spanish Inquisition videos on my YouTube channel. Well, I put them on my like videos list. And I also played a song by one of your favourite bands, the Sisters of Mercy, which had the line in it, I've a brother of sorts in Torquemada. So you're trying to identify me, aren't you, with this inquisitor who had been disciplined for the wildness of his methods and conclusion. Well, nice try once again, but as usual, you're talking crap, because I'm not literally an inquisitor anyway. And I can hold whatever opinions I want and express whatever opinions I want, because I haven't got any office in the church, so really nobody's in a position to discipline me for anything, because I haven't got anything, really. What would they do anyway? They couldn't do anything, could they, unless I went and robbed the church or something. And then they'd have to call the police. It would be a state matter, wouldn't it? So I don't know why you bother, you're just talking complete crap. Anyway, so you make now a quotation from Malleus Maleficarum, although as usual you've misquoted it. So this is the quotation that you make, which by the way is from Malleus Maleficarum, part 1, question 6, although as usual you don't give a reference, but that's where you can find it. And this is the quotation: "We conclude that all witchcraft comes from the carnal lust that is insatiable in women. As it says in Proverbs, there are 3 things that cannot be satisfied, and a 4th that never says enough, namely, the mouth of the vagina, which is why they gratify their desires, even by doing it with demons." Well, Rowan, so this quotation from Proverbs, you couldn't find a quotation to condemn me in the Bible, could you? So you had to come out with this crap. But anyway, this is what Proverbs actually says. 3 things are never satisfied, 4 never say enough: Sheol, the barren womb, the earth ever thirsty for water, and the fire that never says enough. So obviously you're not quoting directly from Proverbs, you're quoting from this book, but actually nobody else translates it as mouth of the vagina. It's translated mouth of the womb, and actually the book of Proverbs is referring to a childless state rather than the desire for sex. Because if we look at the original Hebrew, let me look at it here. So Atse Racham, and it means stopped up womb or something like that, closed womb. It's not referring to sex, it's referring to childlessness. And in case you're thinking, oh well, this person who wrote Malleus Maleficarum was misquoting it. Well, everyone else who translates Malleus Maleficarum says the mouth of the womb and not the mouth of the vagina. You've translated it thus. But luckily I have here some parallel texts. So that's the English there. So have you got that? Look. Sheol, the barren womb, the earth ever thirsty for water, and the fire that never says enough. And here is the Latin, look. And you see it says there in verse 16, infernus et os vulvae, and that means mouth of the womb. And here we have the Hebrew, look, which the Latin is translated from. And here are the relevant words, look, which are very small and hard to read. Atse Racham. There you are. So there it is in parallel texts. So it's the mouth of the womb, not the mouth of the vagina. No one translates it, mouth of the vagina. You must still like looking up rude words in dictionaries and sniggering at them. Most people grow out of that phase. You're a toddler with sex hormones, aren't you? Anyway, since you thought you'd quote from this part of Malleus Maleficarum, which is part 1, question 6, which you've mistranslated, I thought I'd quote another thing that is also from part 1, question 6, which you wouldn't have been so interested in quoting, obviously, but here's what it also says. But for good women there is so much praise. We read that they have brought beatitude to men, and have saved nations and cities, as is clear in the case of Judith, Deborah and Esther. So I wonder why you didn't quote that bit. I'm not defending this work, by the way. I'm just saying that, as usual, you're just blatantly lying to have a snipe. And this is further driven home by the fact that you say that basically the Catholic Church wasn't very interested in this, which is true. But this book was used a lot in Commonwealth England and Puritan New England, and of course I just liked on my YouTube channel the song Star of the East, which has the line in it that you won't like: dearer to God are the prayers of the poor. So, nice try in telling me the mouth of my vagina is insatiable, which is quite a surprise to me really, because it seems to be managing quite well by itself. As does the mouth of my womb, incidentally, which is not insatiable either, so you can snipe all you want, but all you're doing is making yourself look even more prurient, salacious, licentious, voyeuristic, lascivious, lecherous, lustful, and a pervert. So there you are. You go on to say, as Copenhagen remarks at one point, print, like the internet today, he might have added, both diffused and confused authority. It could be a tool equally of enlightenment and murderous bigotry. Oh, murderous bigotry. I don't know anyone who'd do anything like lie about 9/11, do you? And lead to over 1 million deaths. Oh yes, if I think you're a scumbag, it's not because you're a scumbag, is it? It's because I'm a bigot. More gaslighting, Rowan. So, magic is intriguing partly because of its unsettling of authority. Well, it's not intriguing me. And you haven't got any authority anyway, have you? Because you're a cult leader, aren't you? Because you don't have, like a religious leader adheres to the teaching of their religion and teaches it. So, you know, a Jewish religious leader would teach the Torah, and a Christian religious leader would teach the Bible and the tradition of the church and this kind of thing. And a Muslim religious leader would teach the Quran. But someone who only teaches their opinion and then calls it Christianity or calls it Islam or calls it Judaism or whatever, well, that isn't a religious leader, that's a cult leader, and that's what you are. So you're not a religious leader, you have no authority because you simply make things up. So you go on to say, in their diverse ways, both serious public religion and serious scientific research point in a rather different direction. Look, listen, be prepared to recognise profound helplessness and ignorance, and in this dispossessed and unsure moment, something entirely fresh and unpredicted will be able to flower. Well, let me tell you this, Rowan. In this dispossessed and unsure moment, something which will not be happening, something which is predicted, is that I won't be running back to a bunch of sleazy old perverts like you and your astrophysical clergy friend who want nothing but to screw, destroy and discredit me, and have tried to drive me to suicide and force me to come under their control. This is entirely predicted, Rowan. I will not be running back to you. And another thing that is entirely predicted is that I won't be seducing any priests over the weekend either, will I? So, nothing unpredicted is going to happen. I've predicted these things, and this is what's going to happen. So, don't think that I'm going to be taken in by all your rubbish, because you're still, as usual, trying to manipulate the outcome that you want. So don't even bother. Anyway, I thought I could finish with another Bible reading actually, because you do like the Bible, don't you, so much. And so, since this quotation was from Proverbs chapter 30, verses 15 and 16, you know, the one about the mouth of the womb being insatiable or whatever it was, rather than the mouth of the vagina, which is what you said, and you're the only person who renders it thus. So I'm going to quote from the bit immediately before that. So that quotation was from Proverbs chapter 30 verses 15 and 16, and I'm going to quote from Proverbs chapter 30 verses 12 to 14, and this is you I'm talking about. There are those who are pure in their own eyes, yet are not cleansed of their filthiness. There are those, how lofty are their eyes, how high their eyelids lift. There are those whose teeth are swords, whose teeth are knives, to devour the poor from off the earth, the needy from among mortals. So I'm going to leave it there now, Rowan, but rest assured the outcome is entirely predicted and you lose. Hasta la próxima.